Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Rike Hellermann, and I'm the co-chair of the Women in Business group within the GABA. As you might know, GABA is a non-profit organization who fosters relationship between Germany and America. We are in a networking community. We share knowledge, expand connections, and hold events through different industry for our members. So today I welcome you to our event, which is called Intentional Communication for the New Virtual Workplace. And I would like to welcome Mr. Christopher von Nagel today. He's the president and CEO at BSH Home Appliances North America. Hello, Christopher. Thank you again for making this event possible. And first of all, how are you?
Well, thank you, Rike. Hello to everybody. Well, I'm doing fine. I'm sitting here in my home office in Dana Point, which is my workplace since the last 13 weeks now. So it's really a topic which fits quite well to our situation today. Normally, we work from our North American headquarters in Irvine, where we have the responsibility to sell home appliances to the US and Canadian markets. So we distribute our brands, Bosch, Thermador, and Gaggenau all over the US with our factories in North Carolina and in Tennessee. Yeah, and we also have to cope with the crisis like all of us. We changed a lot of our behaviors, the way we're working. We fortunately see that people who are working more now with their home appliances, that there's a wish to upgrade after experiencing that quite intense, and that's a good situation at least for us. So we are not hit as heavy as maybe some other industries like airlines, air industry. Our business is still going quite well, and that's good, of course, for us.
I can agree. I work as at home in the moment. As I said, my dishwasher at least running once a day, which never did beforehand, because like everyone is at home, working from home is a very different kind of working from home remotely, right? So so you as a team leader, how do you have to change everything?
Well, first of all, I have to say we are in an extremely fortunate situation that the transition went extremely smooth. So I have to give a big kudos to our IT department, who really set us up within a week to work from home. And that's not only our people, working normally from the office. It was a big call center which was transferred with all the IT for all our customers who are in need of service technicians. And that works well. What I find is a little bit difficult to keep really these casual and informal contacts. So we really established virtual cups of coffee with team members and others to also have that side chats you normally have in the office to be connected. But other than that, I think it works really well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Christopher, for all these insights. It's quite interesting to see like you obviously as one of like a bigger company here in America already started to change your behavior. So as you might think, I think many companies now implemented a lot of changes within the organizations and how the new looks like. They might agree to do less business travel, renting maybe smaller offices, with people working from home more than ever. I think this is a huge shift in communication, and us workers, team leaders, companies have to keep up with productivity while also staying very positive and engaged. This can be so challenging, and when doing everything remotely. Here to tell us today that virtual meetings don't have to be a waste of time is Clara Farkas. Clara says they can be more valuable than traditional face-to-face meetings. So I have here with me Clara Farkas from Clarity International. She is a communication consultant and a coach who helps people to speak more clearly so they can have more impact. She will help us today to answer all our questions, hopefully, and how to be more effective than exhausted. So, hello, Clara. Hello.
Hello. Thank you.
How are you today?
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today.
So can you tell us a little bit more about you and the work you do so people can understand a bit more where you're coming from?
Yes, I think that's so important. I want to start by saying my introduction to GABA actually was through someone who I see on the call, Sven Johnston. And I think he invited me to my very first GABA meeting. And what I love about GABA is just how warm and inviting and inclusive the organization is. I am not German. However, I lived in Germany. And maybe some of you might recognize from my last name, I am actually Hungarian. And so Clarity International, this is a little play off my own name. And it was very fortuitous that my parents should name me Clara. But I worked many, many, many years in corporate America, and there were some very important lessons that I learned. And what I witnessed was leaders, team members, and companies in general who can articulate and communicate well generally have better engagement, better productivity, and they build better cultures. And so I left about 5 years ago. I was the head of marketing and international marketing and communications for Taco Bell, a company right here in our backyard in Irvine. And I got to travel all around the world with them and learn many lessons. And so I left so I could focus specifically on helping companies, leaders, and teams communicate better.
Thank you, Clara. So before we ask any questions, a huge thank you, obviously, to BSH for making this event possible. This is great support from you, Christopher. Thank you again. So as I remember, Clara, you did recently some research on working from home. I think it was with Dr. Erin Kreilich, and she's from the Core Consulting Coaching Group. So what was the outcome?
Yes, perfect question to ask because it's very timely. You know, Erin and I used to work together. We were colleagues at Taco Bell, and she has her PhD in organizational development, and we have stayed in close contact. And what we realized was, you know, we were all asked, as Christopher said, to very suddenly shift our mode of work, and therefore our communication had to change. And so Erin and I, we were very curious to find out, how are companies and the employees inside of these companies dealing with shifting to virtual communication? Specifically, what kind of impact has this had on productivity and engagement? And one of the things we learned was that, you know, we may have social distancing, but we don't necessarily have to have communication distancing. And the interesting result that we learned was that engagement and productivity actually increased. There was more communication from managers to teams, more communication from senior leadership to the organization, and more communication actually peer-to-peer. This probably isn't surprising. Typically during crisis, and this was a crisis, communication tends to increase. What we also surveyed and learned was that 80% of the survey respondents said that their workload also increased.
Oh.
And so we got really curious about that, because you can work harder, longer for a short period of time. But now, what is the implication for virtual and remote work for the long term? Now we need to see sustained changes in communication behavior, because it's very difficult to sustain your work levels, your productivity for long periods of time. You know, people want to sit back and breathe a little bit and find out, okay, what's the, you know, what's the new normal? What are the expectations now?
And also you're sitting at home on your own. Most of the people, like millennials, they're sitting at home. They are in their home. So how can team leaders within these companies communicate better with us workers?
This is, if you lead a team, this is truly, I think, a call to leadership. This is the time to step in and step up. And what I mean by that is there are very intentional things that you can do, starting with turn on your video, be available. And I want to share a story with you because I think stories are, you know, what we all love most. We tune into stories. And so I was talking recently with someone very near and dear to me. He works for a very large organization, a big aerospace company. I won't say the name, but you know, they're based in Seattle, so I'm sure you can guess. And he has about 200 people who report to him.
Wow,
200.
that's a lot. Yeah.
And I noticed we're talking on Zoom and he has a huge grid posted behind him. And I'm like, you know, what do you have behind you over there? And he says, oh yeah, that's my communication grid. I said, what do you mean? Explain this to me. He says, I have all 200 names of everybody on my team listed. And I make sure that I cycle through every 2 weeks and have a one-on-one conversation with each of them. Now that's commitment. Yes. That is true leadership commitment. And that may not work understandably for everyone, but it's a choice. It's a choice to be present and made available. And so I think there's some really clever things that team leaders can do. And I'd be interested in hearing, in fact, put in the chat, because this is a great place to learn from each other. What are you doing to engage your team? But using technology, using various platforms, creating time in the calendar that a team leader can create office hours, much like a professor would at a university. Hey, I'm available between here and here. Check in, call. So it'd be really cool to see what other people have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So to all the audience members out there, please submit your questions, maybe any comments you have. I will definitely will come back to that later. Would be quite interesting to see what people think about that. And so coming back to not just the team leaders, but also to the team members, how can they stay engaged, be more flexible, you know, staying positive, I don't know, doing 10 minutes workout in between. So how does it work?
Well, it works a little bit differently now, obviously. And again, I think it goes back to the title of the talk today, which is being more inclusive and being more intentional. You know, I think when all of this happened in the beginning, the introverts of the world rejoiced. Said, okay, I can just put my head down and work and get things done. And then, of course, the extroverts of the world were like, what? Where do I get my energy from? Yes. And so hopefully we are in a place now where we have found some equilibrium. And I think it takes all of us to get uncomfortable and give a little bit more of ourselves, making sure that if you haven't had a chat or a conversation with someone, that you make a plan to do that. Reach out to someone, send them a note. Hey, I was thinking about you. Or, hey, I noticed that you didn't say very much in the last meeting. What are your thoughts? So this idea of engaging and being inclusive, thinking of others is incredibly important right now. You know, I talk a lot when I go out and used to give in-person speeches. I talk a lot about networking, and
Right.
the idea of networking virtually is a little bit challenging, and yet we have to still do it. It's not the time now to hide behind the screen. You always have to create opportunities for connection and visibility. Connection, really important because it connects to engagement. And then visibility is important because we all have to continue to grow our careers.
Yes.
And so setting up, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I just find that what you're saying, like you have to go out and communicate. I know I had days where I find it really easy to reach out to everyone and texting and calling. And then I had days where I thought, not today, I can't do it anymore. And I really stayed in. And I also find it difficult, especially with the Zoom meetings. You know, when you go into work and you go to an office, you have this outside persona. You go in and say, okay, that's my work face. You know, that's what I'm doing. And all of a sudden you invite everyone into your home. You know, kids running around you, they see your background, they see where you work. And that must be, for, as I said, for the introverts, really, really difficult. Don't you think? I
would 100% agree. I personally border between the two. Yeah. Here's some interesting research that is being done and has been done. And that is, there's an actual physiological reason why Zoom meetings like this is so exhausting. When we meet in person, face to face, I have a broader scope of vision. I can see through peripheral vision. I can scan the room. In fact, I'm constantly scanning the room, whether I realize it or not. On Zoom, I'm looking at all of these different squares. My brain is trying to process your nonverbal behavior. And it's much more difficult to do this way than it is in person. And of course, as the person who is facilitating the meeting or speaking, I have to make sure that I'm somehow engaging with you and I'm reading your eyes. Yeah. Which is why having video on is really important. The flip side to that, it's also tiring. Yes, it's very tiring. So are there any, say, etiquette rules for these virtual meetings? And so is there yes. And I'm sure there's so many of them that we all know them because we're experiencing them. We all know that, you know, the person who is walking around with their laptop and there's all this movement is terribly distracting. When there's noise in the background. But I think the more subtle bits of etiquette are when, let's say, one person is dominating the conversation and nobody is facilitating it. When a team leader hasn't actually set the rules of engagement in advance. Here's how this is going to go. For 30 minutes, we're going to talk about this topic, and at 30 minutes, we're done. And actually holding steadfast to those rules is really important. Yes. What about like talking back or you know, with the unmute and mute, and so the facilitator then has to just unmute everyone or muting, or what do you think is the best options for meetings, larger meetings? For many meetings, the etiquette says when you sign on to a meeting of this kind is have yourself muted. Right. And then like you would in a normal meeting room, obviously have a look around, see who is there. You might want to engage in chat right away. Hello, everybody. How are you doing? The size matters.
Matters, absolutely.
And what I have found is where there's a lot that is placed upon the team leader. And so where the team leader can actually engage and delegate to other members of the team,
right,
to say, you know what, this week, Susie, you're gonna facilitate this discussion. Bob, I want you to manage chat. John, I want you to take a look at time. All of us are going to practice our virtual communication skills, meaning start with the end in mind. I always say start with the punchline. Try to remove, it's hard, but not having the rambling run-on sentences that often forces other people to tune out. Yeah. It's a real great time to practice communication skills.
Okay, so thanks, Clara. I think we're now going to the questions from our audience. And thank you to the audience members who already submitted questions to us. And we have received some follow-up questions regarding communication, managing, and so on. But also before I start the question, there was one chat line from Tilo, I can't remember the Kozlowski, if I say it correctly. He says, as a team leader, I organize daily walks outside the office, weather permitting, to engage with my teams instead of team lunches. So it's similar to Christopher, who said, you know, I'm doing these coffee breaks in between with clients. So that is actually a really nice idea. Thank you so much.
I love that.
So, yeah,
I do. I really like that, because we know that the first way to manage your mental and emotional state is to manage your physical state.
Yeah.
So change your physical state. Go outside, have a walk. And we can all walk and talk. It's amazing.
Yeah, doing a handstand and going back. Doing it right. So we had several questions come in that fall under the theme of managing a larger virtual forum, meaning more than 10 people. How do you best manage like interactions and interruptions?
Interactions and interruptions. They are difficult in a physical face-to-face scenario, and they're equally as difficult in a virtual setting. Having actually gone through media training, one of the things that they teach us is, again, upfront setting an expectation. So for example, you know, many of us are probably spending more time watching the news than we care to admit. And what you'll find reporters do when they have a guest come on is the reporter eventually will have to interject and say, we have one more minute. We're running out of time. If you can get to the, you know, if you can bring the point to some closure. Yeah. Interrupting is always difficult. It feels rude. It feels uncomfortable. And yet, as the facilitator, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to be the leader, but as the facilitator, you have to be bold enough to say, excuse me, that is a great point. I'd love to hear some other people and invite their ideas as it relates to what you've just said. Susan, let me turn it over to you. Mm-hmm. So there are actual facilitation skills that you can utilize.
Yeah. So I hope I don't have to have a media training before I do all these meetings now. There's also a lot of people were asking about engagement. You know, keeping teams connected, motivated, maybe monitored of some kind of a way. There's one question from Mario Gensch, who says how to cope with interrupted communication with under time constraints. Peggy was asking how can employer keep employees engaged, motivated, and monitored. So as I said, there's a lot of these engagements, and obviously, and also quite interesting question came from Beatrice Sandoval, who said, how can we emotionalize technology, which is kind of difficult. Keep our teams close and feeling like family above and beyond the virtual happy hours or virtual lunches.
Right. There is, I would say, an innate rule of thumb when it comes to communication. We have all of these channels available to us, and choose the one that fits the situation best. If you want to have a personal, close conversation with another person, it's amazing. This thing called the telephone, it still works.
I know.
We can pick up the phone. It also, if you're driven by efficiency, which oftentimes we place a huge premium on, let's get to the point, let's move things along, we need to be efficient. There is a balance between, we need to move the ball forward, we need to move the work forward, and losing the personal connection. And so I always say, at least start a meeting, checking in with everyone. Hey, what did everyone do this last weekend? Or what customer conversation have you had that you'd like to share with everyone? So start with an engaging conversation. And so people should know that the channel needs to marry the content. If I just need a quick yes or no answer, well, then Slack or text or IM, perfect.
Yeah.
But oftentimes what happens is, I don't want to take the time. Let me just see if I can put an entire paragraph into an email.
Oh.
And that's when things can go a bit sideways.
Yeah,
so
I learned the hard way. Yeah.
And then that's what, going back to what is your intention for the communication, and pick the right channel.
Apropos channel, obviously we don't really know. There are so many virtual conference platforms, and which is most suitable for business. It's difficult for us to answer. There was one question. We don't really know. It's like most of it, as I said, most people use Zoom. I think that's what everyone is saying. So maybe fun.
It's interesting. What I have found is very company driven. So depending which company I'm speaking with, their preference is either WebEx, maybe Zoom, Microsoft Teams, whatever it is. So back to your question though, about how are employees monitored?
Yeah.
Interesting article that I read about somebody who works at Microsoft, and she was talking about how to leverage the power of Microsoft Teams. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing with Microsoft Teams is, at least within Microsoft, they are able to measure engagement. They're actually able to measure usage. And of course, what they did was measure usage when they went from March 15th to March, 25th, and they saw usage go up. Now, that also brings about some interesting aspects of monitoring, which I can't speak to the legal part of that, but a good rule of thumb is never put anything, in writing or record anything that you are not comfortable, saying out loud in front of a group of people. Just not a good thing to do.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good admit. So there's like two more questions we have. One question came in from Max Weihrauch. He says in the chat, how does interpersonal communication work, such as happy hours? Or dinners, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I guess I would love to ask somebody in the group if you're willing to unmute yourself. I happen to think they work very well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I can just agree. I just do a lot of these kind of happy hours with my work colleagues really quickly, just to say thank you very much, and I don't know what, and it's just a more personal interaction. I really quite like that. So the last question we have is, came in from Barton Webb. And it's kind of, what assumptions can you make about people's willingness to engage personally on Zoom?
It's very difficult to measure somebody's willingness without asking them. It really comes down to how willing and open are you to engaging through. And when she or he says, you know, willingness to engage in Zoom, I would imagine that's any sort of video platform. And many people are very uncomfortable, would much rather stay, you know, behind the screen. And certainly you can't force anyone. You simply can't. All you can do is encourage, invite, and show them that this is in your best interest. It's in our team's best interest if you engage this way. Otherwise, you risk being left out. And as someone who works with a lot of people on you know, leadership skills, you don't want to be left out. You don't want to be invisible.
Yes.
You want to be visible. And this is creating an opportunity for all of us to get comfortable, certainly with being uncomfortable. We're comfortable communicating in a different way.
Yeah, I think that is a very good end to this meeting. Thank you so much, Clara. Thank you to all the participants. A big thank you again to BSH for making this event possible. And thank you so much to our technical team behind the scenes. I hope you enjoyed our talk, Clara's and my talk. And do not forget, we have more virtual meetings from GABA. The next one is a networking event as a Stammtisch in Orange County. It's this Thursday, it's June 11, and it starts at 6 p.m. And they have a talk topic, and it's all about today's refund. It's challenging. So thank you again, everyone. Have a good day, and goodbye.
Thank you.